Since the Russian 2022 invasion of Ukraine, most people have focused on the performance of the Russian ground forces and that of the VKS, the Russian Air Force, during the conflict. However, lost in a lot of the conversation is the plight of the Russian Black Sea Fleet. While the focus should indeed be on the ground and the air campaigns being waged, the fight on the Black Sea is one that cannot be taken lightly. The Black Sea, after all, holds vital trade and supply routes for both sides. The Ukrainian grain corridor is highly dependent on keeping the sea lanes open to allow Ukrainian farmers to get their crops to market. This is a large portion of the world grain market, as Ukraine is considered a breadbasket of Eastern Europe. The Russians too require the Black Sea for their own grain and for that of oil shipments being exported to partners around the world. Russia also utilizes the Black Sea to move supplies and equipment from Russia to their forces both in Ukraine and in Syria. However, early on, it was thought that the Black Sea would be used by Russia to launch amphibious forces to take over the vital port cities of Odessa and Mykolaiv. But as the ground assault slowed to a halt by March of 2022, this second front never materialized, despite Snake Island being taken and the Russian Navy firing cruise missiles and using the main gun of the Moskva to provide artillery fire. Then in late March, Ukraine finally struck back. First, Russian Raptor-class patrol boats were sunk in and around Snake Island by TB-2 Bayraktar drones. 2 days later, a Ukrainian Tochka ballistic missile attack against the Russian-occupied port of Berdyansk cost the Black Sea Fleet the LST Saratov, a Russian Alligator-class amphibious assault ship. 2 other Rapucha-class LSTs, the Novorosissk and the Caesar Kunikov, were also damaged in the blast. A month later, and the Russian Black Sea Fleet was struck again, this time by 2 Ukrainian Neptune anti-ship missiles as they struck and sunk the flagship of the Black Sea Fleet, the Slava-class cruiser Moskva. Despite some small successes in the following months, the Black Sea became relatively quiet, that is until October 2022, when Admiral Makarov, an Admiral Grigorovich-class frigate, was damaged by a Ukrainian sea drone. At this point, successful attacks against Russian ships went silent for almost a year. The calm was shattered in August of 2023 when the Olenigorsky Gornyak, a Russian Rapucha-class ship, was attacked and almost sunk by a sea drone. A month later, and the Rostov-on-Don Kilo-class submarine, along with another Rapucha-class ship, this time the Minsk, were both severely damaged while in the dry docks in Sevastopol harbor during an attack by Ukrainian Storm Shadows. A day later, the Sergei Kotov was struck by a sea drone and thought to be sunk. A month later, the Karakurt-class Assault was sunk in port. The day after Christmas, shortly after Ukraine had shot down 3 Su-34 fullbacks near Kherson, the Russian Rapucha-class Novorosissk was attacked and sunk by multiple Storm Shadow missiles as it sat in the port of Feodosia. On February 14th of this year, the Caesar Kunikov was attacked and sunk by sea drones while being towed toward Sevastopol. And finally, the Sergei Kotov was attacked and sunk in a sea drone attack, with one drone seeming to attack a previously damaged section of the hull and entering inside the ship to explode, setting off a massive fireball. So what is actually happening to the Russian Black Sea Fleet, and how are they losing to a navy without any actual ships? The answer? They weren't really any good in the first place. The Russian Black Sea Fleet looked fairly formidable, especially to the likes of Ukraine at the beginning of the war. After all, they had total and uncontested control of the Black Sea. The Moskva gave them a floating S-300 platform that could keep Ukrainian aircraft at bay and could also provide some limited gunfire at close-in targets. The Rapucha class could each land up to a battalion of tanks or troops onto shore around Odessa within a moment's notice. The other ships could launch cruise missile strikes or harass and sink Ukrainian shipping, thus cutting off vital economic help to their farmers and their country. But this was all on paper, really. The Moskva, in theory, could provide a good air defense umbrella over the Black Sea, but in reality it was a floating liability waiting to be exploited. The ships were overdue for being replaced, the communication system didn't work if the ship's radars were on, and less than half of the self-defense weapons for cruise missiles didn't work. Plus, most of their firefighting gear was either missing or under lock and key to prevent pilferage. In the US Navy, if it had been discovered in such a bad state, the captain and the admiral would have been court-martialed for the condition and readiness of the ship. The Rapuchas could do very little to defend themselves and were key targets to stop or slow Russian supplies from being moved around the Black Sea. And with them out of the way, Russia has little threat to launch an amphibious invasion force. Then there's the Sergei Kotov being sunk. The ship is part of a class that has little to no use except as a patrol vessel and gun platform. It has no major missile armament and no air defense system to speak of. So what does this all mean for the Russian Black Sea Fleet? Well, for starters, the Black Sea Fleet is probably one of the worst showings of major navy since the Falkland Islands. For starters, each Raptor-class patrol boat cost around $3 million apiece. The Alligator-class Saratov cost around $7.5 million. Each of the Rapucha classes cost $17.4 million. The Sergei Kotov comes in at a cool $65 million, about the same price as a Su-35 fighter. The Rostov-on-Don was estimated at around $300 million, about the same price, if not a little bit more, than an A-50U. But then there is the loss of the Moskva, a ship that was the largest ship sunk in combat since the Falkland Islands War. That cost Russia $1.3 billion. So that's 5 Raptor classes, $15 million. 1 Saratov class, $7.5 million. 3 Rapucha class, either sunk or made useless, $52.2 million. Sergei Kotov, $65 million. Rostov-on-Don, $300 million, and then the Moskva at $1.3 billion. That gives you a grand total of $1,739,700,000 just in major ship losses in the Black Sea Fleet. The tactical and strategic ramifications are far worse. The Russian fleet has been so harassed that they have moved most of their ships to the port of Novorosissk on the eastern banks of the Black Sea. This puts them out of range of cruise missiles, but also far away from being able to provide escort to Russian shipping as easily. This has caused Russian shipping to avoid sailing through the Black Sea. Then there is the strategic cost. The Russian Navy was able to provide shipping and ferry service when the Kerch Bridge was damaged. The fleet could also provide protection to the Kerch Bridge from sea drones as well. With the Russian fleet now heavily damaged, by some estimates thinking almost a quarter of their fleet is damaged or sunk, and the A-50s now being protected on the ground, the Sea of Azov, along with the Greater Black Sea, is now open to attack from the Ukrainian Navy. Could this lead to a new path to Ukraine to find a victory, or at least slow the Russians on the ground? We will have to see. Thanks for watching this video. Be sure to watch other great videos in our library here at Combat Ineffective.